Tiffany here from Peterborough and the Kawarthas Chamber of Commerce. Welcome everyone to the Boss Series, Business Owners Sharing Solutions. Today's topic, we're actually co-presenting with the City of Peterborough and Peterborough GreenUp, the Green Economy Hub. We are excited today to have several guests guiding us through the series today. It'll be exciting. Shout out to our sponsors today, Bell and Lynn Woodcroft Sales Representative, Royal LePage Frank Real Estate. Of course, they sponsor the Boss Series throughout the year, so it just makes the work happen, and we are excited. That being said, I'm going to introduce our first person of the session. We've got Natalie, the Hub Coordinator for Green Economy Peterborough. Natalie Stevenson, welcome, my friend, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I'd like to start us off in a good way this afternoon by respectfully acknowledging that at least as attendees, we are located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. I'm Natalie Stevenson. Welcome, everyone. I'm Hub Coordinator at Green Economy Peterborough, a project of GreenUp. We're very excited to be co-presenting on this alongside the Chamber and the City of Peterborough. Just as a small introduction, I'm going to just dive right in. There's no doubt that the pandemic and the restrictions we've experienced have dramatically changed the way many of us do business. Most of us that are here today are part of an organization that has survived by innovating and adapting. And now here we are at this moment, another point of change as restrictions lift across Ontario, and we're seeing a shift back to business as usual for some and a variety of approaches for others. Some employers are emphasizing a full-scale return to the office, and some have, during this time, have transitioned to a fully remote workplace. Others are still embracing the idea and are in the process of creating policy to protect and support their businesses. Wherever you are right now, we're here today to help discuss different approaches and broaden your understanding of the advantages of a hybrid work model and the value that remote work adds to businesses. Our guest speakers, Shane Monte and Dean Kennedy, will expand on many more of these advantages in a few minutes, but from my perspective, as someone who works with local companies to measure and reduce their environmental impact, I just wanted to specifically mention the opportunity to use remote work as one way to help your business to address climate change. Green Economy Peterborough is a GreenUp program and a network that helps businesses to set goals to address climate change while reaping the benefits of action like cost savings, risk mitigation, and brand enhancement. The case for reducing emissions continues to grow stronger with business impacts like escalating energy costs, increasing insurance costs, and advancing government regulations to bring businesses into alignment with Canada's 2050 net zero target. Commuting trips made in personal vehicles, as well as vehicular travel for business, like taking a trip to meet clients, are both areas of emissions that we can measure within an organization's greenhouse gas inventory, and in turn, areas that can become part of an action plan to reduce emissions. Many large corporations were using remote work to reduce corporate emissions before the pandemic hit. Xerox is a good example. They cited an emissions reduction of 41,000 tons by having 11% of their workforce at home. And another tech company, Dell, estimated its work from home employees have avoided driving nearly 26 million kilometers a year for an annual emissions reduction of 6,700 metric tons. These larger tech corporations may have had a head start on remote work, but this certainly demonstrates an opportunity for businesses of all shapes and sizes. A number of our Green Economy Peterborough members are currently tracking the impact of business travel or employee commuting as a part of their approach to becoming more sustainable, adaptable, and flexible. And at this point, that said, I'm excited to introduce our guest speakers for this afternoon. We will have Shane Monte and Dean Kennedy from EY in Alberta, followed by Christy Hook from our very own local LET Architects to share her local perspective on the topic. But first and foremost, I'm going to introduce Shane and Dean. Shane Monte is a Partner People Advisory Services at EY, assisting clients with their most complex talent change and digital activation challenges. He brings over 20 years of professional experience in North America and Australia across multiple industries, Most recently, Shane has been assisting private and public sector clients prepare for the future of work and developing people and talent strategies to enable a digital enterprise and assist leaders to develop strategies enabling hybrid work environments. Shane's experience with remote and hybrid work spans back to 2015 when he was a consulting advisor working with leaders from Calgary's economic development work shift initiative. And then we have Dean Kennedy, a manager in EY's workforce advisory services, assisting clients with their most important people and change challenges. He has 15 years of professional experience in the field of people and change, including over a decade of experience as a human resources leader. Most recently, Dean has been assisting clients to prepare for the future of work and develop people and talent strategies, including the implementation of hybrid work models. Welcome, Dean and Shane.
Thank you very much, Nellie, and thanks everyone for making the time here today. I'm Shane Monty, and with me is Dean, as Nellie indicated, and we appreciate the opportunity to present to you today and talk about some of the things that we as EY, and many of you probably recognise EY as an accounting firm, but one of our largest service offerings for clients is helping clients deal with future work and talent. So we're here today to talk from that perspective. Neither Dean or I are accountants, so you can stay safe on the tax side of this, but certainly today, hopefully we can share some insights that we've learned over the last few years, particularly through the pandemic, on the future of work and how organisations of all scales can and certainly right size and be prepared for that. And I think, and we'll talk about some of the benefits there as well. Dean, if you want to move forward, that would be greatly appreciated. And Dean. So for purposes of today, I think we want to keep things fairly high level, but maybe give you a few insights as the things that we've seen over the last few years, certainly around the future of work and why future-proofing your organisations is really important and why it's important now. Now, as Natalie said, I started talking about this topic about 2015-16 on the impetus with Calgary Economic Development to start to talk about things like how do we optimise our assets around the city and transport assets? How do we encourage flexible work arrangements to attract talent to the city? And it's true for all of us now, I think, across Canada and certainly globally, that the changes in employee demands and flexibility are evident. We've all survived the last 2 years and recognise that we can do a lot of our work in remote ways. But as we think about the future of work and what's to come post-pandemic, the challenges that many of our organisations are facing are really around winning the war for talent, but also how do you establish your enterprise to work within the economic conditions that Peterborough is trying to encourage around remote work and flexible work arrangements, but how do you actually do that as an enterprise? And through our conversation today, we're going to share a couple of insights that we know from organisations across the globe, but more specifically in Canada, what those organisations are starting to do and what questions they're going to ask to be successful in this return to work as a business and contributing to local economies. But before we get into any of that, I might hand across to Dean to maybe talk about some things that are realities for us all that are driving some of these conversations. And I think back to 2015 when we started thinking about why is flexible and remote work important. We were thinking about it with a number of clients within the Calgary region, but certainly Calgary Economic Development, that the areas of changes in our business models, our employee value propositions, and really maximising productivity and accessibility to a workforce. One of the interesting topics we used to talk about is how many days we lost to snow each year in Calgary. You can imagine we get a bit of snow out here. I'm always baffled that we can make it through, and we probably don't lose a lot because our ecosystem is set up really well. But in those jurisdictions where climate change and other things are taking effect, there really is large impacts on the economy in lost work days. And most recently, I was in Dallas in February, and we lost 3 days of productivity in Dallas across the whole city because there was a bit of snow on the ground, which baffled me coming from Calgary in Canada, that these guys couldn't operate as a city. So a lot of impacts around that. And so our organisation's resilient to those implications, and how do you make sure you get access to resources you need? And then, of course, at the big picture, if cities and organisations can do this well, there's a number of economic and business cost considerations that would benefit us all, certainly about, real estate footprints and getting access to certain resources, massive drivers and benefits across the economy to both encourage and attract organisations, but also do it at a lower cost. We know that digital ecosystems have taken hold over the last 5 to 10 years, and how do enterprises within the new economy get access to those new skills as you need? And, how does preparing for the future of work allow you to do that more effectively? And we've seen lots of evidence for that. And then, of course, the sustainability and planning drivers. So, in terms of benefits to organisations individually, but collectively, if you can find the right way to do this as we return to work and open up new organisational opportunities, then it's worth us all to think about what's the best way to do that. And over the last 12 months or so, we've been really focused on how do organisations do that, and what are the no regret decisions that you might need to take, and what are the consequences or choices that you have. But we'll cover some of those things in the next little while. But let me start by handing off to Dean and talk about one aspect of why this is really important, and that comes down to the very rapid change in employee expectations over the last couple of years as we've lived through the COVID situation. Dean, do you want to take the next couple of slides?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Shane. Just the logistics item. I want to make sure everyone's seeing the full screen. I want to make sure I'm sharing my right screen is okay. More used to Teams and Zoom. So yeah, really nice to be here, everyone. As Shane has mentioned, we're really kind of looking at the future of work and what's going on in the environment. And as probably you're aware, the conversation around flexibility has been very huge from both an employee and employer perspective. And what does that mean for the future? Where does that go? Oh, sorry, just to go back to our slide. So we've actually done a lot of research on this, and there's a lot of research out there. But one of the big things around flexibility is that employees in the market are saying, we want more flexibility. And part of what's driving that is through the pandemic, for those that have been able to work remotely, they've experienced more flexibility in where they can work, working from home, maybe working remotely, and even flexibility in start and end times, or maybe taking some time throughout the day to really attend to personal needs. And so what is really happening is that there's a higher demand to have that flexibility going forward. So a couple of things in our study here, you'll see that 87% of respondents said they want flexibility in the future of where they work. So the ability to decide, do I work from home? Do I come in the office? Maybe do I even work remotely further away from home? And 88% of respondents said they want flexibility in when do I work? So more flexibility on the days of the week that I work, start and end times, be able to kind of mix life and work a little bit more together. So it's really some kind of key drivers from an employee perspective, and definitely something employers are really thinking about right now is, okay, based on these needs, what people are looking for in the hot employment market, how do I really respond to that? We also dug even further deeper into that, going out to people and asking them, if you had a choice in flexibility between where I work and when I work, what's more important to you? And what people said is that actually flexibility in when I work, my work times, my work hours, is actually more important to me. It was 1.4 times more important to respondents on the flexibility of when. And when we dug even deeper into that, you'll see on the right-hand side of the slide, there is that flexible start and finish times was actually the most important thing to respondents. And so I think for employers, it's a really kind of good news story, because even for kind of frontline workers or kind of essential workers, there can be opportunities to provide more flexibility. If you're in a service or manufacturing business, how do I find opportunities to give people more flexibility in their life to kind of deal with personal things or kind of things during business hours? So flexibility of when I do my work is very important to people, and there's really an opportunity to look at that. One other thing I just wanted to point out is from external surveys. So there's a Gartner survey recently. They've looked at some research and data, and pre-pandemic, they noted that about 30% of employees in the market had the opportunity to work remote some of the time. In the future, it's about 50%. So they showed 48% of employees in the future are expected to be able to work remotely some of the time. So as you note, there's a huge opportunity for people in the market to have some remote work. It's going to be a demand for employees. And as an employer, it's really, how do I provide more flexibility to be able to compete for talent? because definitely, as we're seeing, there's a war for talent in the marketplace, and by providing flexibility, it can be an opportunity for you to really kind of attract and retain people in your organization where that is possible. Shane, I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about the different ways we can work in this new reality.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the reality is that, you know, the employee preferences and very rapid changes in those preferences is one part of the puzzle. But, you know, it's not lost on me. Many of us run businesses where we have, you know, frontline service responsibilities. The realities of our business are such that we need to be available to our clients and our customers, and we want to do it. And, you know, I reflect back to maybe when we all had our first job, that, you know, the normal course of business of signing an opportunity, a job with an employer, is that our normal days of business are 8 till 5, Monday to Friday, right? So those days of shifting, but certainly not lost on us that, you know, all of us have to have a place of work, or a location of work, or, you know, what is the purpose of work? So one of the things that we've noted over the years, and many of you may have seen this in recent publications, from global organizations like Microsoft, some of the large US financial institutions, lots of large entities within Canada, right down to small, medium enterprise, and even micro businesses have benefits of the office space. And I know we're talking a little later with some folks focus more on the space of the office, but certainly when we looked at how work needs to be done, many of organizations have struggled with what is the office, what is the place of work look like, and why do we have those? So we synthesized thousands of points of data and really brought it down to a very simple view of the world, where many organizations need to make a decision about what is the work that we do and how do we do it, where do we need to do it. So, you know, traditional models of work in the past is the office is the location for all these things. It's an opportunity for people to connect. It's obviously a place to collaborate and innovate and communicate and build relationships in many traditional ways. But, you know, the work that is now being done can often be done in different locations. So we spent some time pulling apart what is work and where does work need to be done. And, you know, if we see work as a place, and in the traditional sense, then all things are done in that place. If we see work as an activity, then that activity can be done in many places. And we talked about previously about work shift, but work can be done where and best it is located. So, you know, it may not necessarily be a work environment, but many organizations that are thinking about the return to work, future work, are really looking at a combination of work as an activity versus work as a place. And if we synthesize what the real drivers of people connecting in the workspace are, it's really about connectivity. It's really around collaboration. It's really around driving innovation and creativity opportunities, much better done in physical locations than virtually, we think. But, you know, administrative tasks and things that need to be done to serve clients and operate the business, a lot of that can be done anywhere. And, you know, there's folks out there that have now chosen their whole business model to be completely remote. Now, we think that's an extreme example. In many cases, not all organizations can grow and sustain themselves completely remotely. And we're starting to think that not all organizations should actually opt into being fully in the office in the future, but certainly in between, what choices do we have? So given this model of how, you know, things are starting to evolve, there really is a step off point. Most of us are now deciding, well, I think we have to be hybrid. What are the hybrid models that we have at our disposal? What are the key decisions that we need to make to both encourage people to come back to the office, attract and retain talent, but also run our businesses effectively, which is really the choice. So I might narrow down onto the next slide. What are the choices that many organizations have got around the choice to be hybrid? Now, I'll go back to where I started. A hybrid model gives you a lot more benefits around costs. There's economic drivers, there's a whole range of factors, but it really does come down to how your organization views the way you want to do work. At the extreme ends on this slide, traditional ways of working, as I said, is, you know, 5 days in the office, 7 days in the office for some of us, I'm sure, or at the work site as required. You know, very traditional, but we're seeing a trend away from that very rapidly. And it's fair to say all of us now know we're going to have to make a choice. Do we want our people in the office again 5 days a week? And I've got some client examples where they deliberately made the decision that everyone, no matter what you did in your on your job and where you're located, everyone would be in the office. That was mandated from the top down. And in reality, they had some leakage in talent. In reality, everyone knew that they could do their work differently, and the loss of flexibility, particularly for the female workforce, I would say, that had adjusted to being more flexible during the working days. Pulling everyone back in under a strict set of rules was very limiting in terms of talent issues. On the other hand, many organisations can't just continue to work this way, and there's lots of examples where the great experiment of remote work has got to go away, in our view, but that's no longer reality. But to give you a bit of guidance, the rules of the game for those organisations have made the choice to come to a hybrid scenario. Really are basing it on a decision that is rarely, do you want to be structured in that approach or more unstructured? And again, this is now the first decision that many of us will need to make is, do we want to prescribe those rules-based type working arrangements? Do we want to make it clear? And there's lots of examples out there globally and within Canada that, organisations are setting a set number of days per week, whether it's 3 or 4 in the office, and then on the 5th one, do as you will. Now, you'll make a choice on that, of course, whether that's going to be right for your business, but certainly that degree of flexibility is definitely beneficial and open up some other benefits to your business. At the other end, maybe a little bit more difficult, and maybe as smaller organisations start to think about this, choices that you made are being unstructured. By that, I mean, we are going to specify that you need to be in the office, for example, 50% of your work week. What you do, how you do it around that is really up to you. And you can see some organisations thrive in that reality. But at the extreme end, when there isn't any rules of the game, I think a lot of organisations are losing that creativity, innovation, collaboration part of the business. And so leaving it completely unscripted does create some unintended consequences. So, even an unstructured hybrid model, which may be very desirable for employees, is not necessarily highly desirable for your organisations and for management. So, but quite frankly, one of the key criteria that many leading organisations have had to make is, do you want to be structured or do you want to be unstructured in the way you go forward? So with that in mind, I think, that has many, many consequences. But the next thing we asked our clients and the survey asked was, how do you make these decisions? So Dean, if you could go to the next slide, perhaps. For those organisations who have made the decision to be more of a remote entity and embrace the future of work, we've really synthesised this down into 6 key questions and decisions that many organisational leaders or owners need to make. And we think this is probably grounded in best practice. And there's a couple of other things that you need to make decisions about. First and foremost, are you a type of business that can enable a future of work, a remote operation? Not all businesses can. If you're an open heart surgeon, pretty tough to do that remotely at the extreme end. But many of the things that we are doing as enterprises can be done in a more flexible way. It's a question of whether you want to do it or not. And that's purely a choice. But if I balance off the opportunity, the benefits in terms of cost, the access to talent, employees' preferences, and really establishing your business for the future, if these 6 questions are asked and answers, most of those entities that are moving into a remote working environment are being more successful than those that aren't asking these ones. So very briefly, I think, I'll cover those key management decisions. And before we close out, maybe for those of us who have larger enterprises with HR functions, some of the things that Dean has seen in terms of what the impacts are for HR professionals as well, real quick. But the first and most important question, and it seems a little bit counterintuitive maybe for some of us, but those managers and organisations that seek a degree of input from their employees. Now you can base it purely on research and evidence, but a lot of those management teams that are asking their employees their preferences for the future of work are getting a great step off point. Now, it doesn't mean that all teams can accommodate all employees' wishes. That's certainly not what we're seeing and suggesting, but it certainly gives you a starting point. And some of the activities that people can do offsite are really, it's important to get an input from your employers. We talked about flexibility, and again, if you can offer flexibility of timing and location, those things are more attractive to employees at this point in time. And also providing flexibility when the work is performed. And many of us might have needs in terms of customer and client expectations around when you'll be open for business and how you will support them. But within those constraints, flexibility of how you enable your workforce is another important part of success for those more successful hybrid organisations. I think the other really important aspect here, and for those of us who do really run small and medium enterprises, where there's a service component to it, having a place of purpose obviously is self-evident. But sometimes defining what that purpose is and why you are bringing people together in the office is really important. And there's really great examples out there that for those organisations that do define why we need people in the office, the value of that, and also the flexibility that provides to both them and the organisation. It's really important to define that purpose, and how you will bring people together is also important. Defining new norms, and there's a couple of examples out there that if you are a business that is allowing both flexible and on-site work, the trend right now is to essentially view all workers as remote workers and establish team norms and expectations around that. You don't want to set up tribes and sub-tribes by those that are in the office or out of the office. You certainly need to be mindful of what that means. And I think one area of focus for managers in this area is not to fall back to old habits of only recognising, rewarding and supporting people that turn up to the office. We have seen some disequity and some exclusive behaviours happen when managers are not mindful of where their workforce are located and how to put those new norms into practice. And finally, I think it goes without saying that management sets the tone across how the enterprise will look and feel. Maybe this is more relevant for medium to larger enterprises, and certainly in how they establish their management norms. But leadership visibility and how managers and leaders show up and think about those other 5 factors is really important. And particularly their role in ensuring that there's an inclusive workplace to encourage and get the best out of people. It's really an important part of it. So, Dean, I know that there might be some considerations for HR as well. Or do you want to tap on one or two of those before we wrap up?
Yeah, you bet, Shane. I'll just kind of add a couple comments to that. I mean, as we've discussed, flexibility is very important. It can be a really strategic advantage to integrate into your organization. We've talked about kind of what that might look like, especially in a hybrid environment. From a really practical people perspective or HR perspective, if you do make some decisions on adapting a hybrid environment or different flexibility option, it's really important to go back to your organization and your policies and really make sure that they're aligned. In organizations we worked with, we've actually kind of reviewing their policy documents to make sure that it supports actually and it is in line with the new hybrid environment. Some other things to think about too is potentially remote work agreements. It's really kind of changing the employment contract, and particularly looking around safety at home for those that are working more at the home workplace. Make sure that they have a safe work setup. I've kind of thought about safety in a different environment, something we may not have thought about pre-pandemic. If people were fully in the office, we thought about having a safe workspace, ergonomic equipment. May not have thought of that from a home environment. So we really want to make sure that people are safe and working in the most healthy possible way, regardless of where they work. And then also thinking about how do we support people to work a little bit differently. It may not seem kind of obvious, but if everyone's working fully in the office, it's kind of, we're all in the same playing ground. We're all in the office. We can get to the same boardroom meetings, those types of things. We're all in the same playing field. If we're all remote, we're also on the same playing field. But we're in a hybrid environment. It becomes a little bit more complex. If anyone's ever called in remotely to a bunch of people in a boardroom, you kind of know what that looks like. So it's really important to really kind of support people and how do we work in a hybrid environment. It could be some training courses on best practices around that. And like Shane said too, kind of thinking from a remote first perspective, and something we've done for clients is really providing good training documents and even training courses to help people adapt to a new way of working. So just a few kind of practical HR and people things to think about. If you're implementing this, you can work with your HR department or consultants to really kind of help implement your strategy in a meaningful way.
So with that all in mind, I know we're running up against our time, but certainly happy to answer any questions or observations from the audience here as we have them. We will, and I'm happy to share the presentation here through the forum if anyone's interested in it. We've also got a few other, I guess, short vignettes or bits of data that folks on the call may be interested in pursuing as well. We just consolidated them in a couple of places as well. So certainly, I think that the future of work is positive in many ways. It also creates some challenges for many of us, but certainly I think the benefits of thinking about how your organisations and businesses will be able to embrace the future of work, what you need to do to make decisions about how you'll encourage new ways of working, which is a burden, and we recognise that the world has shifted, and you will need to make some choices around that. But certainly, the winning the war for talent and helping some of the other economic and business objectives across the region. How do you set yourself up for success? How do you create the right environment to continue to grow, and how do you attract the right talent? When there's definitely competing demands, and those who do this well and those who get in front of the pack will obviously take advantage of the benefits available in this new way of working. But certainly happy to take any questions or hand back to the team, and thank you all once again for the opportunity to present today, but happy to open the floor.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dean and Shane. It looks like Jackie has a question. Jackie, you can unmute yourself.
Hi there. Work is a really big part of our lives, our identities, our social piece. How working from home really kind of dulls a lot of that. What good examples have you seen about the development of workplace culture, workplace identity?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I think, of the three things we talk a lot about, one is digital, one is future of work and how do we bring people back. And the third topic in our business at the moment is really around creating the right culture and environment. And I think, culture is, it's easy to say it, but it's often hard to create it. And I think, when we think about even going back to those 6 areas that are really important around creating the right culture. And let's just focus on a hybrid work environment. I think it's really important that the purpose of the business and the way leaders and management of that business will operate in this environment, and having a very clear definition of that is a really important statement. We ourselves, as a large firm, there's 300,000 of us around the world, and we do have guidelines around working remotely. But when it comes down to it, each leader and each management team will need to make some decisions on what we need to do to help our clients, and then how will we operate ourselves. So I think having a clear purpose, having some rules that are clearly articulated, having no definition of how we will work in a hybrid model is really not the right decision. And even, I've seen in recent weeks, like, let's just see how things go is probably not the right answer. I think, if you have a work environment or a business that gives some flexibility, you also need to give some boundaries about why we come together, why we need you in the office, and also what we allow in terms of flexibility. So creating the right culture. The last thing I think is really important is ensuring that if you want to create an effective hybrid culture, you really have to be thoughtful about how you do day-to-day business, right? Like, I think we are seeing, at least anecdotally, exclusive behaviours start to happen when managers are not mindful that some of their workforce is out of the office maybe 3 or 5 days a week, right? You have to be quite deliberate in creating the right collaborative environment. bringing people back for purposeful meetings and events and what certain activities is really important. And I think, the days of walking the floor and water cooler chat have to be recreated in some extent, because that really does underpin culture in many ways. It's very intangible. It's not rules based, but how do you do that in a hybrid environment? I think ultimately management teams really do need to create and incentivize people to come back together, at least periodically, but very deliberately, and not just let things drift. Yeah.
Excellent. I was just scanning to see if any other questions are coming in. It is A-OK if you want to launch your questions at the end. We'll have Q&A session as well. So don't be shy if you haven't thought of it yet, or you just haven't brought the courage to ask. You can also send me your questions. I will ask on your behalf. That being said, thank you so much, Dean, Shane, Natalie. We really, really appreciate the insights. I think that that infographic with the 6 things we can do now was really, really insightful. Maybe kind of highlighting some things that wasn't on our radar. And you mentioned hybrid places, remote workplaces doing it really well, which I thought was the perfect segment into our introduction to Christy Hook. Christy Hook works with Let Architect. Christy, I will spotlight your video there, my friend. Excellent. And over to you for your perspective.
Great, thanks very much. I don't want to spend a lot of time kind of rehashing what Dean and Shane had to say, so I'm going to pick up on a few things that I want to kind of circle back to. As far as employee engagement goes, where we started when we were looking at creating our hybrid model was a survey of the staff around current thoughts and feelings about how often they wanted to be in the studio, what any worries were. People have legitimate concerns about coming back into the workplace in a pandemic situation, and what steps we may take as a business to help mitigate some of those concerns. And we do our employee reviews in January every year, and we actually went back to those data that we looked at in January 2020 before the pandemic to see what some of the issues people were having actually working in the physical space, so that when we went back to the studio, we weren't kind of creating the same problems. We took it as an opportunity to really relook at how we were occupying the physical space of the studio. Having said that, there was some capital investment that we had to make. And any of you designing your workplaces may want to think about what that looks like for you in order to maintain distancing and just allow for an easier uptake for people coming back to the studio. We did set up our desks as hoteling workstations, so no more assigned seating. We installed some monitors, some extra keyboards, cables to allow people just to bring a mouse and their laptop with them to the studio and then go back home. As creatives, we encourage our staff to look at their project teams and pick and choose when they come into the studio around which projects they're working on, who they need to collaborate with, to take advantage of that time, as Shane was talking around collaboration, creativity, culture, really using that as their productivity drivers for when they should be on site in the studio and when they need to maybe buckle down and look at reviewing some details on some drawings, which really do benefit from not having the distractions of other folks in the studio. One of the hurdles we found to working remotely that we've had to really be mindful of creating opportunities for in a hybrid situation is that opportunity for passive learning. We are a teaching practice. We often have co-op students. We have a lot of early career staff who are with us. And we found that some of the reductions in profitability that we were seeing during the pandemic were often an efficiency factor, where things were just taking longer. And one of the things that was an issue with why things were taking as long as they were primarily communications based, people not knowing what questions to ask, when to ask them, junior staff perhaps getting too far down the wrong road before being recalled because they weren't close to do the shoulder tap or overhear a conversation. So those things we found too, that we really need to focus on now that we're reemerging into the studio, is creating those learning opportunities. Practically speaking, we do use our calendars and a Miro board to kind of schedule space because we have hoteling stations. We're not up to full capacity in the studio. So not everyone who works with us, we're currently about 22 people, including our students, have physical places to put their bottoms. So we do use a Miro board to kind of schedule them in so that you can see who else is there that you may need to collaborate with, and make sure that if you need a proper station for working, that there is one available to you. And those are cleared on a weekly basis. What else were the points that I thought were important to circle back to? Dean, policy. We did spend quite a bit of time looking at policy, both from a work from home, which is where we went to initially at the beginning of the pandemic, how people are managing their physical workspace, how people are managing the environmental components of their workspace to make sure that we as a B Corp certified business are still being responsible and extending the values and the culture that we have in studio out into those fingers of the home-based offices. So that piece was really important to us, as well as privacy and security considerations. Not everyone, and I think this is an important thing to remember when looking at hybrid models, not everyone has the luxury of a dedicated workspace at home that demands a certain amount of square footage, that demands a certain amount of resources, and we're not all dealing with a level playing field with our staff. And I think that's important for management and owners to keep in mind, is not everyone has that luxury. So if there are computers, papers, data that may be seen by roommates who share a space, or computers being manhandled by someone's kids, or whatever can happen in a home environment, that you kind of have a sense of how to put some boundaries around that, where your liabilities are for data and privacy concerns. Reiterate that staff really should not be meeting with clients in their homes, both for their own safety and security, but for any liability from the company as well. We as architects build physical things. We sell time, but we build physical things. So we do need to go into the field and do site visits and collaborate with clients and trades and some consultants in that way. So also looking at that from a policy perspective as one of our places of work, that's a mobile place of work, and how do we look at our policy and our ways of doing business to extend to those venues as well. Site visits have to be done, so there was no way around that, although we did far fewer of them during the pandemic. Sorry, I'm just reviewing my notes, make sure I didn't cover everything, but I wanted to circle back to what I thought may be places of input from Shane and Dean. Yeah, I think also looking at roles is key to see who kind of takes advantage of coming into your workplace. However, I think people that do more creative roles, who tend to be more of the extroverts among your staff, are kind of keen to get out there. We have a lot of staff who are young, who live by themselves. Some are new to Peterborough and new to the country. are new Canadians, generally speaking, and they've been very isolated at home. So to try to create environments to kind of encourage those folks who really would benefit on many levels, not just professionally, from being back out in the world, to get out there. And people like me who do primarily admin functions, who don't need to collaborate as much, and I need to be coaxed out of the basement from time to time because I've gotten so used to being here. So kind of just having touch points with your staff. How are you doing? How are you feeling about being back? Create full team opportunities for lunches, continuing education, full team meetings in person is something that also I think can benefit the group as a culture. Not all of our project teams kind of cross-pollinate. Some people only just for scheduling needs work with the same groups of people all the time. And there may be others in the studio that they may never have had an opportunity to work with. And I think there's a lot of trust that gets built with face-to-face communication, having a chance to work together. So even when you are back in your work from home environments, you do benefit from having had those relationships and those discussions and those sidebar passive conversations from even those brief touch points in the studio. You take that back to home with you, and the work seems to be more efficient and more trust and faith among the project teams from that point. I think that's all I had to add that was novel to what Shane and Dean presented. So, and I'm happy to take any questions as well if folks want that perspective.
Excellent, really insightful. And Let Architect, of course, was awarded an Employer of the Year at one point. And I think by what you've done throughout this pandemic really speaks to that and how you've handled this. Really great points there, Christy. I feel like it was quite insightful. I think when you were talking about the locations of the home office and everybody not being on the same playing field is a big deal. And the start of this pandemic, my husband and I have a very small house. Every room in my house is a dedicated space that I didn't want my work to interfere with my real life. So for the first year of this pandemic, it was emotionally and mentally very draining for me because at first I was at my kitchen table, and then I'm sort of in the spare bedroom, and then I feel like I'm a troll in the basement. And it was really a challenge for me to find out what was comfortable and what was going to make me work the best, because I just felt so out of sorts and sort of disconnected with like my home life. And then I got into a cycle that was quite toxic of convincing myself I wasn't working hard enough. So if I had like a tech issue or my internet was slow, and I just felt like I was behind on things. It was like this cycle of waking up early and working till late in the night. And there was like a lot of guilt, I think, with working from home. I just maybe felt like I shouldn't be this comfortable when I'm at work, right? And I feel like you mentioning that, Christy, really spoke to me. And that's kind of one of the things I'm really passionate about work from home and hybrid is making sure that you have an ergonomic space, a dedicated space. You can unplug and still enjoy your home and your life and not be trying to relax, thinking about the list of things to do that's kind of sitting behind you, right? So incredibly insightful. And we appreciate you sharing with us today. So thank you, everyone. We do have some questions today. We've got the experts here, so we might as well get the clarity, get the advice while it's at our fingertips. So one of the questions I had, which I thought was really interesting, and I'm sorry, it's like a little paragraph, so I can't quite lift it off the page. So I'm going to read it as is. Many people are struggling to find housing they can afford in communities where they are being offered jobs. At the same time, employers are looking further for attracting talent due to workforce and skills shortage. What role do we think remote work can play in recruitment?
I might just to avoid the silence there as well. I think it's a really great question, and I think about every region, every economic development zone is really thinking about this. But I'll be tangible on this. I think there are those employers who recognise that opening up opportunities for folks that may not live in their home location is starting to be something they're going to have to seriously think about more deliberately. I think there's a couple of factors that we in a big accounting firm recognise: the jurisdictional tax considerations. There's some real considerations, I think, in certain regions around workers' compensation and safety and health. Those things are hard sometimes to avoid. And as a very small enterprise, you probably don't want to take on the burden and the uncertainty and the risk around that. So, but I do recognise that gig economy is starting to be more of a term. And I think, you know, when we're talking about the planning on this, one of the things that I did recognise is if regionally you have an incentive to attract people who may not live in your location, you know, to employers in your region, how do you do that? How do you enable that? How do you make it easy collectively across the chamber, across the business community to put in place systems that will make it easier for your employees? I think if you can do that collectively, then that's certainly an important thing. And then I think the other thing that's important, and not all of us have dabbled in this, but the employment contract is shifting as well. So we're seeing a more of a move away from employees as such, which has some pros and its cons, but certainly the gig economy is starting to take hold. And I think one thing I would say about attracting new skills, it's hard to do when they're in demand everywhere in the world, but if you have an ability to work with workers on a temporary basis and hiring, and I think our employment contract is very shifting. We need certain skills to do certain things like projects. If you have a way in your business to attract gig workers who just want to get in, get out, collect the dollars for the contributions they make, and it may be only 15 or 12 hours a week. If you have a way to do that, then you're going to attract those skills more efficiently. They may be workers that live in Costa Rica, but if you can find the right way to do that within your business to attract those skills and make it easy for their employees, and they'll be attracted to you. Now, how do you get to that market? That's another story, but certainly if you're willing to dabble in that area, I think it's certainly worth considering, but not necessarily easy, but certainly something that many of us are starting to see. Yeah.
Excellent food for thought. Really great answer, Shane, for me throwing that at you. Excellent. I'm going to flip it over to Natalie. I believe, Natalie, you were going to share something with us. I felt like was going to be super helpful.
I just wanted to add some resources. We have some great resources available from another fabulous GreenUp and City of Peterborough program called Shifting Gears. Shifting Gears provides workplaces and individuals with resources, community, motivation, equipment, and an annual May commuter challenge to motivate, support, and sustain a shift to cycling, transit, and remote work. And we have 4 resources related to remote work that I'm going to have Tiffany send out in the handout. We have a guide for employers to create an e-work policy. We have a guide for employees making the transition to working remotely, a checklist for creating a hybrid work policy, and a checklist for building a remote work agreement. So if that is helpful for you, we'd love to have you receive those in the handout and to engage with Shifting Gears. It's an amazing program.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Natalie. We will get that out to you as soon as we've got it. So that way you have the resource. Of course, connect with Natalie if you've got any questions. Connect with any of our panelists. Of course, shout out to the City of Peterborough today. Sue's on the call. Thank you so much for working with us to bring this presentation together. You all were tremendous. This information is an incredible resource. It's really insightful. I'm sure it calms a lot of anxieties because it's like, okay, now what? How are we going to build this from scratch? What do we doing moving forward? And I think having these tools, the information, the experts on the call was tremendous today. So thank you, all of you, for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Before we wind down today, there was just a couple things to mark your calendars with. First of all, chamber members, tag us on social media. We like to share your content across our platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, you name it, we're on it. Give us a shout out. We want to share it. There are are sponsorship opportunities available with Peterborough and the Kawarthas Chamber of Commerce, of course, with the merger of the two chambers that happened in January. We've got multiple opportunities coming down the pipeline, including our business summit, which is happening in April. It's a great space to be seen. Your COVID-19 business resource portal, you know it's there. As the information comes down from the levels of government, we're breaking it down in digestible pieces, so it's all at your fingertips, peterboroughchamber.ca. 26 Coffees is our networking group. If you're looking to network, get connected, reach out to Matthew at peterboroughchamber.ca. We can get you into that group. Chamber members, Peterborough Chamber of Commerce, the 2021 AGM is happening on March 31st at 11 a.m. So we've got about 90 people registered, but we want you all there. So get registered, join us. The Business Exchange is going to in-person next month, first Tuesday of the month, April the 5th, 4 o'clock. Also Chamber AM is going in person this month, or next month, Tuesday, April the 12th. We've got Tracy from That's a Wrap Catering as our speaker. Your Business Summit, mark your calendars, April 25th to the 29th. It's a whole combo. We've got a hybrid of an event. Most of the content is going to be virtual. Some of it's already curated, so you can watch it at any time. We'll have live webinars, a live keynote speaker, and every day we'll have a networking tournament in a different area. So we've got Lakefield, Buckhorn, Norwood, and Peterborough networking tournaments happening in all of those areas. So check it out, mark your calendars. If you want to sponsor the Business Summit, reach out to me. We can have a little chat. And last but not least, tonight is the Kawartha Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. They have our 2021 AGM. So it's all about on the Kawartha side. We're not talking merger, but we do want the Kawartha members to show up, get the information, review the reports, all that good stuff. It's tonight at 5 o'clock via Zoom. You can get registered on the website if you need it. Again, our sponsors for today is Bell and Lynn Woodcroft, sales representative for Royal LePage Frank Real Estate. We appreciate you for sponsoring this event, bringing it to all of our members and really the entire business community. So there you are. There's your chamber news wrapping up. It is 12:58. We have you out of here beautifully on time. If you need anything, your chamber is your backup. Reach out to us. We're your backup mic, we're your support system, whatever it is. Again, shout out to Dean, Christy, Natalie, Shane. We appreciate your insight, your time today so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon.